Page 47, Economic Inductance. An electrical inductor, coil of wire, has an electronic current as its primary phenomenon and a magnetic field as its secondary phenomenon. Inertia. Corresponding to this, an economic inductor has a flow of economic value as its primary phenomenon and a population field as its secondary phenomenon of inertia. Now, when the flow of economic value, e.g. money, diminishes, the human population field collapses in order to keep the economic value, money, flowing. Extreme case, war. This public inertia is a result of consumer buying habits, expected standard of living, etc., and is generally a phenomenon of self-preservation. Now, inductive factors to consider are 1. Population, 2. Magnitude of the economic activities of the government, 3. The method of financing these government activities, C. Peter-Paul principle, inflation of the currency. Translation. A few examples will be given. Charge. Coulombs, dollars, 1939. Flow/current, amperes, coulombs per second, dollars of flow per year. Motivating force, volts, dollars, output, demand. Conductance, amperes per volt, dollars of flow per year, per dollar, demand. Capacitance, coulombs per volt, dollars of production. Inventories/stock per dollar, demand. Time flow relationships and self-destructive oscillations. An ideal industry may be symbolized electronically in various ways. The simplest way to represent a demand by a voltage and a supply by a current. When this is done, the relationship between the two becomes what is called admittance, which can result from 3 economic factors: 1. Hindsight flow, 2. Present flow, and 3. Foresight flow. Foresight flow is a result of that property of living entities to cause energy, food to be stored for a period of low energy, e.g. a winter season. It consists of demands made upon an economic system for that period of low energy. It says in parentheses, winter season. Okay. Page 48. In a production industry, it takes several forms, one of which is known as production stock or inventory. In electronic symbology, this specific industry demand, a pure capital industry, is represented by capacitance, and the stock or resource is represented by a stored charge. Satisfaction of an industry demand suffers a lag because of the loading effect of inventory priorities. Present flow ideally involves no delays. It is, so to speak, input today for output today, a hand-to-mouth flow. In electronic symbology, this specific industry demand, a pure use industry, is represented by a conductance, which is then a simple economic valve, a dissipative element. Hindsight flow is known as habit or inertia. In electronics, this phenomenon is the characteristic of an inductor. Economic analog equals a pure service industry in which a current flow. Economic analog equals flow of money, and this creates a magnetic field. Economic analog equals active human population, which if the current money flow begins to diminish, collapse, it has war in parentheses to maintain the flow of money, i.e. energy. Other large alternatives to war as economic inductors or economic flywheels are an open-ended social welfare program or an enormous but fruitful open-ended space program, William Cooper emphasizes. The problem with stabilizing the economic system is that there is too much demand on one account of one, too much greed, and two, too much population. This creates excessive economic inductance, which can only be balanced with economic capacitance, true resources or value, e.g. in goods or services. The social welfare program is nothing more than an open-ended credit balance system which creates a false capital industry to give non-productive people a roof over their heads and food in their stomachs. This can be useful, however, because the recipients become state property in return for the gift, a standing army for the elite. For he who pays the piper picks the tune. Those who get hooked on the economic drug must go to the elite for a fix. In this, the method of introducing large amounts of stabilizing capacitance is by borrowing on the future credit of the world. This is a fourth law of motion, onset, and consists of performing an action and leaving the system before the reflected reaction returns to the point of action. A delayed reaction, the means of surviving the reaction, is by changing the system before the reaction can return. By this means, politicians become popular in their own time and the public pays for it later. In fact, the measure of such a politician is the delay time. The same thing, and this is page 49, the same thing is achieved by a government by printing money beyond the limit of the gross national product, an economic process called inflation. Note, and this is William Cooper in the brackets, remember that inflation is only the act of printing money in excess of gross national product. They could blame it on the price of widgets or oil only because you never knew the real cause. The real cause and the only cause of inflation is the printing of more money beyond the gross national product. Now, this puts a large quantity of money into the hands of the public and maintains a balance against their greed. It also creates a false self-confidence in them, and for a while stays the wolf from the door. They must eventually resort to war to balance the account because war is ultimately merely the act of destroying the creditor, and the politicians are the publicly hired hitmen that justify the act to keep the responsibility and blood off the public conscience. See section on consent factors and social economic structuring. If the people really cared about their fellow man, they would control their appetites, greed, procreation, etc., so that they would not have to operate on a credit or welfare social system which steals from the worker to satisfy the bum. Since most of the general public will not exercise restraint, there are only two alternatives to reduce the economic inductance of the system. One is that the populace bulging each other to death in war, which will only result in total destruction of the living earth. Two, take control of the world by the use of economic silent weapons in a form of quiet warfare and reduce the economic inductance of the world to a safe level by a process of benevolent slavery and genocide. The latter option has been taken as the obviously better option. At this point, it should be crystal clear to the reader why absolute secrecy about the silent weapon is necessary. The general public refuses to improve its own mentality and its faith in its fellow man. It has become a herd of proliferating barbarians and, so to speak, a blight upon the face of earth. They do not care enough about economic science to learn why they have not been able to avoid war despite religious morality and their religious or self-gratifying refusal to deal with earthly problems renders solution of the earthly problem unreachable by them. It is left to those few who are truly willing to think and survive as the fittest to survive, to solve the problem for themselves as the few who really care. Otherwise, exposure of the silent weapon would destroy our only hope of preserving the seed of future true humanity. Page 50. The household industry. The industries of finance, banking, manufacturing, and government, real counterparts of the pure industries of capital goods and services, are easily defined because they are generally logically structured. Because of this, their processes can be described mathematically and their technical coefficients can be easily deduced. This, however, is not the case with the service industry, known as the household industry. Household models. The problem which a theoretical economist faces is that the consumer preferences of any household is not easily predictable, and the technical coefficients of any one household tend to be a nonlinear, very complex and variable function of income, prices, etc. Computer information derived from the use of the universal product code in conjunction with credit card purchase as an individual household identifier could change this state of affairs, but the UPC method is not yet available on a national or even a significant regional scale. To compensate for this data deficiency, an alternate indirect approach of analysis has been adopted known as economic shock testing. This method, widely used in the aircraft manufacturing industry, develops an aggregate statistical sort of data. Applied to the economics, this means that all of the households in one region or in the whole nation are studied as a group or class rather than individually, and the mass behavior rather than individual behavior is used to discover useful estimates of the technical coefficients governing the economic structure of the hypothetical single household industry. Now I want y'all to think about that when they say we are the biggest consumers here as a mass, other than studying that as individuals. Now, one method of evaluating the technical coefficients of the household industry depends upon shocking the prices of a commodity and noting the changes in the sales of all the commodities. Now, economic shock testing. In recent times, the application of operations research to the study of the public economy has been obvious for anyone who understands the principles of shock testing. In the shock testing of an aircraft airframe, the recoil impulse of firing a gun mounted on that airframe causes shock waves in the structure which tell aviation engineers the conditions under which parts of the airplane or the whole airplane or its wings will start to vibrate or flutter like a guitar string, a flute reed, or a tuning fork, and disintegrate or fall apart in flight. 51. I'm going to stop here on 51. We're still in chapter 1, page 51 in the book Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars. I hope that everybody is listening and taking notes. Peace and blessings to you. I get off in 3 minutes and I am exhausted. So I will be going to bed. I will check in tomorrow to start back reading in Genesis and the Wisdom of Solomon. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. Peace and blessings to you and your families. And I'm out.